It's not something I ever thought I'd say out loud, let alone confess like this. But you're here, and maybe you'll understand, or maybe you'll judge me. Hell, I'm already judging myself. But I can't keep this bottled up any longer. I'm 50 years old. A woman who's seen life, who's supposed to know better. I've been married to Kenneth for nearly a decade now, and in all those years, I've prided myself on being the dutiful wife, the glue that held this house together. Until Jason came back home. Jason, my stepson. God, just saying his name makes my stomach knot and flutter all at once. He's 24, tall, with this wiry strength that makes his body look carved rather than built. His mother, rest her soul, blessed him with those piercing green eyes. They don't just look at you, they see you. When Kenneth said Jason was moving back in, I didn't think much of it. A few weeks, maybe months, until he got back on his feet. It's what families do, right? But I wasn't ready for how he'd fill this house with his energy, his presence. It was like every corner of our home suddenly vibrated with him, his scent lingering after a shower, his laugh bouncing off the walls, that damn habit of walking around shirtless like he didn't know what it did to me. It started innocently enough, or so I told myself. He'd help me in the kitchen sometimes, chopping vegetables, asking about my day. His charm was effortless, disarming. He wasn't like Kenneth, who'd grown complacent over the years. Jason noticed things, like when I got a new haircut or wore a dress that clung just right. One evening, after Kenneth had gone to bed early, Jason and I stayed up talking. It was harmless at first, just chatting about life, dreams, regrets. I had a glass of wine, or maybe two, and Jason had his whiskey. At some point, the conversation turned personal. Too personal. He asked me about love, about whether I was happy. Happy enough, I'd said with a forced smile. He tilted his head, studying me in that way he does. You deserve more than just happy enough, he murmured. I should have stopped him. I should have said goodnight and walked away. But instead, I stayed. The first time it happened was in the kitchen. Kenneth had gone out for a round of golf, and Jason was helping me with the dishes. I was wiping the counter when he came up behind me, so close I could feel the heat of him. You work too hard, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I froze. I should have laughed it off, told him to get back to scrubbing the pans. But then his hands brushed mine as he reached for the towel, and I swear to God, it was like electricity shot through me. I turned to face him, and there it was, that unspoken tension we'd both been pretending wasn't there. Jason, I started, but he cut me off. You're beautiful, he said, his voice rough, raw. Do you know that? I mean, really know it? I opened my mouth to protest, to remind him that I was his stepmother, for Christ's sake. But before I could say a word, his lips were on mine. I wish I could tell you I pushed him away, that I told him to stop. But I didn't. God help me, I didn't. His kiss was hungry, desperate, and it awakened something in me that I thought had died years ago. It wasn't just the kiss. It was the way his hands slid around my waist, the way he pressed me against the counter like he couldn't get close enough. And I melted into him, my hands clutching at his shirt, pulling him closer. We didn't go further that day. But the line had been crossed, and there was no going back. After that kiss, I tried to pretend it never happened. I avoided Jason as much as I could, keeping busy with errands, chores, anything to stop myself from thinking about the way his lips felt on mine or the heat of his hands on my skin. But Jason, he wasn't playing along. He found every excuse to be near me, lingering in the kitchen when I cooked, offering to help with things I didn't need help with. And those green eyes of his, they followed me everywhere. It was maddening and thrilling and so damn wrong. The second time it happened, Kenneth was away on a business trip. I'd spent the entire day telling myself I'd stick to my room, keep my distance, but by evening, I found myself in the living room with Jason. We were watching some movie, I can't even remember the title, when he shifted closer on the couch. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice low. "I haven't," I lied, keeping my eyes glued to the screen. "Liar," he said, and then his hand was on my thigh. I froze. My pulse hammered so loud I could hear it in my ears. "Jason, we can't." "Why not?" He cut me off, turning to face me. "You feel it too. Don't tell me you don't." He was so close, his scent a mix of soap and something entirely him, flooding my senses. My body betrayed me before my brain could catch up. I leaned in, and this time, there was no hesitation. His mouth captured mine, and it was like a dam had burst. There was nothing tentative about it, this was need, pure and raw. His hands slid up my body, gripping my hips and pulling me into his lap. My mind screamed at me to stop, but my body was already giving in, my fingers tangling in his hair as his lips moved to my neck. I don't know how we made it upstairs. All I remember is the way his hands roamed my body like he'd been waiting for this moment forever. When we finally reached my bedroom, the same one I shared with his father, it felt like crossing into forbidden territory, and yet I couldn't stop. He undressed me slowly, reverently, like he was unwrapping something precious. His touch was firm yet tender, his lips leaving trails of fire across my skin. When he laid me down on the bed, he paused, his eyes locking with mine. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I should have said no. I should have shoved him out of the room and locked the door behind him. But instead, I reached up, pulling him down to me. "I've never been more sure of anything," I whispered back. The way he made love to me that night, it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. He wasn't like Kenneth, who treated sex like an obligation, a routine. Jason was attentive, passionate, like he wanted to worship every inch of me. He kissed every scar, every wrinkle, whispering how beautiful I was, how much he wanted me. I should have felt ashamed. And maybe a part of me did, in those quiet moments after, when I lay tangled in the sheets with him. But mostly, I felt alive. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, desired. And that was the beginning of the end. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It became a routine. Whenever Kenneth was away or asleep, Jason and I would find stolen moments together. Sometimes it was quick, desperate kisses in the hallway. Other times, it was hours in my bedroom, exploring each other like we had all the time in the world. There was one night I'll never forget. It was late, and Kenneth had gone out with friends. Jason and I were in the kitchen again, with me pretending to cook while he leaned against the counter, watching me. "You drive me crazy, you know that," he said, his voice thick with desire. I turned to face him, my heart racing. "You're not exactly easy to ignore yourself." He crossed the room in 2 strides, pinning me against the counter. His hands were on my hips, his lips finding mine with a hunger that left me breathless. Before I knew it, he had me lifted onto the counter, his body pressed between my legs. "Someone could walk in," I whispered, But even as I said it, my fingers were already pulling at his shirt. Let them, he growled, his mouth trailing down my neck. It was reckless, thrilling, and utterly intoxicating. He made me feel like a woman again, not just a wife or a stepmother. And that's what scared me the most, how much I craved him, how much I needed him. I don't know how long we can keep this up. Kenneth isn't stupid, and I know we're playing with fire. But every time I tell myself it's the last time, Jason looks at me with those damn eyes, and I'm lost all over again. I know you're probably judging me, and I get it. I'm judging myself too. But if you've ever been in love or lust, you know how it feels to be powerless against it. That's where I am now, powerless, trapped in a whirlwind of guilt and desire, knowing this can only end one way but unable to stop myself. So there it is. My confession. Judge me if you want, I probably deserve it. But at least now you know the truth.